in here, so they'll join us as they log in. My name is Casey Meehan. I help run the programming at Sustainability Institute, and I want to welcome everyone here, whether you're a longtime Sustainability Institute supporter or if this is your first SI event. We are really glad that you could join us for today's Sustainability Chat virtual tour featuring urban homesteading with the Bittners. A few things to be aware of as we start here. Microphones and cameras are all muted, and we do that for bandwidth purposes primarily, so please keep them muted for the duration of today's virtual tour. We are also going to be monitoring the chat box throughout, so if you've got a question for the Bittners as we're moving through here, and feel free to enter it into the chat box and we'll get that. And also this session is being recorded. It'll be available on our webpage tomorrow. So we also have, I want to make you aware of a new membership campaign that we're launching. In fact, we just launched it this week. At the Sustainability Institute, we really believe in pushing forward a positive future vision of sustainability for the whole Driftless region. And how do we do that? Well, primarily by celebrating sustainability efforts in our region, and then also by connecting you to those efforts. So if you are at all inspired by our work and want to be part of helping it continue, then please do consider becoming a member or donating today. And you can do that really easily if you go to our webpage, sustaininstitute.com. You'll see in the upper right corner, there are buttons for donating or becoming a member. Just click on those and you can pay via credit card or through PayPal. We've got varying levels of commitment to choose from. And regardless what you choose, we are just really grateful. And we want to just thank you in advance for any amount that you're willing to offer. You know, we feel strongly about this, and we know that that your support will help bring you more of the sustainability good tidings from this region for the years to come. Before we get going with the actual tour, I would like to take just a moment for you to take a couple of seconds maybe to respond to a few very simple anonymous poll questions about growing food in the city. So you should see on your screen now 2 questions. Do you use any of your yard space to grow food, yes or no? And the second question, which areas of today's tour are you most excited to learn about? Check all that apply. Take a couple of seconds, and your responses help Katie Bittner, our presenter, better address what it is that you're interested in learning. So take another couple of seconds. All right, so it looks like, wow, 9 out of 10 do use space in their yard to grow food, and it looks like most people are interested, Katie, in urban gardening, so growing food, with the second place coming in at beekeeping. So, so let's get started then. Katie and Willie Bittner are no strangers to sustainability in the Driftless region. You probably know them as the co-founders of WISCOR and the owners and founders of Great Lakes Trail Builders and Great Lakes Sustainability. In 2011, the Bittners purchased a 100-year-old home on the north side of La Crosse. And this home had 0 trees, 0 gardens, a perfect south-facing roof, and it was basically a blank canvas to create an urban homestead. They now open their homestead up for tours to UWL students and garden tours. And today they are really excited to show you what they've created over the past 10 years. So it went from a place that was a blank slate to a pretty incredible productive site. So they're going to share that with you. They're going to share their successes and failures along the way. And they want to talk about how they've gotten to the point now where they're able to produce most of their food annually. So we'll spend about 20 minutes touring their homestead, followed by about 15 minutes of Q&A with Katie and Willie afterwards. So again, as questions bubble up for you, feel free to type those into the chat box and we'll collect those and have some time at the end for a Q&A session. So with that, Katie, take it away.
All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today on the Sustainability Institute. I'm just gonna keep my camera focused out for now so you can see what we're talking about. What I wanna start with is our rain garden here. So when we first moved to La Crosse, there were 3 ash trees down this stretch. And as you all know, with the emerald ash borer, we lost those trees. As they started replanting, we got a filbert in our front yard, which you can see, which we were very excited about. And then it opened up the opportunity 3 years ago to put in a rain garden. So you can see the rain garden here. There's just a variety of native plants. We got a lot of these from Prairie Moon Nursery, and some of them that we actually got from our backyard prairie, which we'll talk more about that later. But you can see there's a pale purple coneflower, which is native to the area, little blue stem and prairie drop, which are grasses, and of course, the milkweed, which brings in monarchs. And just in the few minutes standing here, I saw about 5 or 6 monarchs come through. So that's always exciting for us and for the plants and for our little ones, as we have 2 little kids who get very excited anytime they see the monarchs. One thing you can see here is that we started with the rain garden in our yard, and then I'm just gonna slowly turn this way, and you can see our neighbor's rain garden. So we just took the plants that we had in our rain garden and split them and put them in hers. And then we just finished her north side boulevard for a rain garden, and our neighbors south of us also wanted one. So we now have rain gardens down this whole stretch, which is really great for water runoff and for bringing more pollinators in. So I'm just gonna slowly walk you up this way. In our front yard, we try to maximize as much space as we can for growing food or putting in pollinator plants. So you can see we have container plants all over the place. And when we used to travel around the country before we settled in La Crosse, we would spend a lot of time just bringing container plants with us so we could have food on the go. So we'd grow tomatoes, put them in the back of our car and move on to the next spot. Further down, we have a little free library and we put a living roof on the top of that. So you can see kale off the top. It's a little ways away. Walk you down this way. So we've got kale off the top. We've put strawberries up there before, any sort of little thing that also serves as food. And then we always leave a chalkboard out here. It has my son's name on it right now, but typically at the beginning of the season, we'll put extra starters that we have and just give them away to anybody who's interested in starter plants. So being that we start our seeds inside every year, we grow them from seed, we put them under grow lamps, and then as the weather starts to be not so terribly cold, we move them out to our greenhouse. And from there, once it's time for planting season and they're more robust, we transplant all of those into the yard. So being that we plant extra each spring in case they die off and the cold snaps in the spring, oftentimes we have more than enough to share with anyone who's interested. We also got some really great starters from Grow this year. So if you're ever looking for awesome starters, we had some really great plants and got to start some new plants that we hadn't in the past, like celery. So very cool spot if you're looking for starters. As I come up this way, you'll see our apple trees. I'm gonna come in close so you can see. This is a bumper year for us for apples. So right here we have a Honeycrisp, and then we've got another apple tree right behind it. And then below the apple tree, we've got a strawberry patch, and then we have comfrey that we have right next to the apple tree. And we planted comfrey because it's a nitrogen fixing plant. So it helps every plant around it to grow. And then what we do is we take the leaves off, put them in a bucket of water, and it creates this amazingly foul smelling water that smells like manure, and it's one of our best fertilizers we have. So we can turn around and use that water as our fertilizer for all the plants, which is great. I'm just gonna turn you around one more time. And you can see here we've got just a little pond area. We're trying to put as many native plants in there as we can, and each year we have frogs that come into the area, so it's fun to be able to see the wildlife that comes in. So I'm gonna back you all up And I'm gonna have Willie take over, Willie
Hi,
Bittner,
everyone.
and he's gonna start talking about the next section.
Yeah, so as Katie mentioned, we have the apple trees. Under the apple trees, we also, in front of the apple trees, still very good, south-facing, we have a square-foot garden that we've experimented with lots of things over the past 5 years that it's been in. Most recently, we planted 100 head or cloves of garlic and recently harvested them and dried them that will be used in our processes of making our pasta, pizza sauce, canning processes. Just beyond that, we have a very small pollinator or prairie of a mix that we use from Prairie Mern Nursery. It's a PDQ, the pretty darn quick mix, which has worked out great for us. And just beyond that, we relocated our asparagus patch from the side of our house to the other side of the square-foot garden over there. Just beyond that, we actually got our neighbors into a little bit of square-foot gardening, and they experiment with different things each year too. Along the fence line, we actually have tulips that we've planted, and it's just nice visually appearing. They're not up right now. You can actually see a rogue kale plant. This kale is probably a family favorite here.
We have a lot of rogue plants throughout our yard. So one of the things that we've decided is that if a plant is willing to grow, we'll let it grow. It was very interesting this year because we had an abundance of kale, lettuce, tomatoes, and dill all over our yard. So people would laugh because they'd come up to our house and between the stones, you could see lettuce growing up between the stones. And our kids were very excited about just being able to pick that lettuce and kale wherever it grew. The other thing I was going to say about the prairie out front is we do have a small prairie. The much larger prairie is in the back of our house. But over the last 10 years, we've seen a lot of changes in La Crosse in a really positive way that's been very exciting. I think as a community and as a homeowner and as a family that's really dedicated to sustainability and urban agriculture, because when we first moved here, we tried to plant a small prairie out front, and the city actually came by and said we had to take it down or we would get a fine. It was interesting because we explained that, you know, it was all native prairie plants and we were just trying to bring in pollinators. But at that point in time, it wasn't something that you could do. But now that's changed in the city, and now you can have rain gardens, you can have native prairies. You just have to make sure you keep out the noxious weeds that might try to grow up in there. But it's been really great to see that exciting change and be able to put those prairie plants in.
In front of me here is our son Liam's garden. Liam has a stone raised bed that me and him built together. In it this year, he planted a pumpkin plant, which has literally overtaken a huge part of this side of the yard. Something he was very excited about, and we always let Liam experiment within the garden. He also plants carrots. He had some chives, which he also loves, and he loves radishes. All were part of his garden that he planted this year. Also hidden next to his garden is a blueberry bush, which we were able to get a few blueberries off of, probably about a pint this year. And across the way, very close to the house, we have tomato plants that we intermix with basil plants in between. Katie's showing you a close-up of the pumpkin this year. Liam is very excited about the pumpkin plants around the yard this year. One thing that happened is after we planted Liam's garden with him this year, he told me, he's like, Papa, I finished planting the rest of the seeds. And that led to pumpkin plants coming up around the rest of the gardens that you'll see throughout the tour here, which has been a real treat. Some of them that I had to pull out to be able to keep up with other gardens. We recently, 2 years ago, put in some black locust raised beds. Black locust is a wood invasive species to this area. It's something I've been working with for the past 15 years. I actually worked with it a lot on the East Coast, and it's very rot resistant, and it makes excellent raised beds. So in the place of where we used to have our asparagus patch, which really overtook and had a hard time walking past as the season grew on, we placed a 4 by 8 foot raised bed. In it this year, we had ground cherries, which we got to grow. That was exciting for the kids, and they really loved them. We also have pepper plants. There is carrots. There's kale on the corners because, again, kale is probably the favorite vegetable of both our kids in the garden.
One thing I wanted to say, and Casey, let me know if I should be answering more of the questions that come through, but I just saw a question come through that said, what happens if we have sandy soil? And since Willie was just talking about the black locust, I felt like it was a perfect time to address that question. We actually have some pretty challenging soil where we're at. You probably noticed we went upstairs to get in the backyard. Our house typically would be considered in the the floodplain, except that they had raised it up. This all happened before we bought it. But when we first started trying to work on our yard, we dug down and realized it was very sandy. And we also would just run into random debris that they must have used as fill to lift up all these houses. So what we've done to manage that whole challenge is what Willie just said, is we've brought in raised beds in any way we can. So we have locust raised beds, we have container plants. Over here, Willie's a trail builder and also focuses on the specialty of dry stone masonry. So you can see that we have a lot of rock gardens that we've just raised up. And the key is just to give your garden some space to put new soil in. And one of the great resources we have in La Crosse is you can go down to Isle of Plume and get their compost soil and bring it back and put it in your yard. And we've had great luck with that. So I would say if you have sandy soil, just try to raise up those beds. You don't have to do something like black locust. You could do something easier. Like when we first moved in, we threw pallets down. So a lot of times you can get pallets for free. They will degrade faster, but if you're just trying to get a start, go ahead and throw pallets down and fill those in and go from there. If you're looking for something that's going to last longer, stone or black locust is a great option.
Is right in front of Katie. We have our herb garden. So each year we have herbs of basil or sage, rosemary, mint, thyme, and oregano that we plant throughout. And we also have a giant horseradish plant to the side, and that's in a half of a rain barrel. And horseradish is very good to contain within your yard because it will spread, as of the mint and the oregano spreads quite easily through the yard too. So that's why we put everything in this raised stone garden, because it keeps the plants a little more contained. There's still work that has to be done.
So you can see the horseradish right here. We also have lemon balm in there and dill. We have chives off to the side. And then we just try to intermix different plants that are good pollinators. So coming around here, I'll show you, here's another raised bed, just a smaller, this is a cold frame box. So we can do is we can put plexiglass over it as the months get cooler, and it helps to allow the plants to keep growing. So we'll pull out the kale at that point and probably put in some smaller plants to keep them going. Back here you can see our plum tree. So again, like Casey mentioned in the beginning, we didn't have any trees when we got here. So we've really just tried to incorporate them as much as possible. And it is amazing how much fruit you can get off of the trees. One thing that we would recommend if you get any sort of a fruit tree is the first year, pick off the fruit before it grows to any substantial size, because otherwise it really taxes the tree and it will struggle in the subsequent years if you don't pull off that fruit. So out front, we learned a hard lesson with our smaller tree that we let it grow right away. We were really excited about all the apples it produced, and it's always struggled. And the tree behind it, the Honeycrisp, we took those apples off, and that tree produces barrels of apples. It's amazing every year. We had a question, what species of plum tree, and is it self-pollinating?
Unsure exactly the species of plum tree. I could take a look at it and get back to you. It is a self-pollinating plum tree. We had a close call the first winter after it was planted. It was girdled around the base of it about 95% from rabbits, and it actually came back and started producing and growing extremely well.
I would say this year we probably got 100 or 200 plums off that tree. So definitely produced a lot. All right, right here you can see one of our rain barrels. We have 5 rain barrels around our house. They're great. They're great for watering your plants. Tough summer when it doesn't rain like it happened this summer, but it's still amazing what they can hold. We do have a metal roof. If you have an asphalt roof, you do want to be aware of if it's breaking down and that debris is falling off into your rain barrel because it can contain chemicals in it. With the metal roof, it's nice because everything can just run off. And so when we needed a new roof, we did that intentionally so we'd be able to utilize that water runoff. There's also a stormwater runoff credit with the city. So if you have 5 or more rain barrels, you can put an application in to the city for the stormwater runoff and they'll reduce part of that water bill. All right, so.
Turning around, and you can see off in the distance above is our vines. We have a Concord grape that we have, and we have hops. We have 2 different varieties of hops in front of us, and one more. We have Magnum and Nugget hops in front of us, and we use privacy barrier between us and our neighbors. On our outdoor kitchen, we have Cascade hops growing. Those hops we can actually, harvest here shortly, and we can use in the brewing process, which for quarantine time, I've actually been getting back into home brewing, which we do in our outdoor kitchen, which we'll bring you to a little later. Underneath to the right or left, we also have our cherry tree. That's a Washington cherry that also has a little bit of permaculture going on underneath of it with, again, the comfrey plant, which is nitrogen fixing and really helps out with the growth of the cherry tree that we have. The cherry tree, in the one trick that we end up doing that's helped out a little bit this year is, as soon as the cherries are getting close to ripening, we bring out a plastic owl that we put out on our trellis, and it really helps out. We get a little bit more fruit that way and less that the birds get.
I'm just going to walk you up quick in case you haven't seen hops before. They're such an interesting plant and really quite beautiful. So that's the hop, and that's what we'll use to brew beer later on. And like Willie said, it's an excellent privacy barrier as well if you're just looking for something to give you a little privacy between, in our case, the alley and our patio out back. All right, so here you can see 2 more of those long black locust beds. We've played around with this style back here and have figured out how to maximize our space. So it used to be 3 separate squares that we had offset from each other, but it actually has worked better to do these 2 long gardens with a walking path down the middle. And basically, when you look at the different types of plants we have out here, over the last 10 years, we have really focused on what can we get the most production out of. So, our son really likes those pumpkins, so we're gonna put those in because that's special for him. But they do take up a lot of space. Similarly, things like cabbage, squash, broccoli, all of those things are very big plants with not a ton of produce at the end of it. So with all of our great farmers markets around here, what we try to do is think about what we can get from the farmers market where maybe somebody has more space to grow that food. Or another awesome place that we go to all the time is the Kane Street Community Garden on the north side up here. It's 2 blocks from our house, so it's quite convenient for us. And you can go and volunteer there and then pick produce at the end to take home with you. So that's where we tend to get more of that cabbage, squash, any of those plants that take up a lot more space, because when you're dealing with an urban lot, you only have so much space to work with, and so you really have to think about what you're going to get the most out of. One interesting thing here is this is our basil. It looks like we haven't picked it, but we have actually, this would be our 3rd picking the next time we pick it. So what we do is we just go down to the V in the plant. So go all the way down. It almost looks like you're going to take the whole plant, and you can just break that. Use scissors when you do it. Don't break it off like I did. But if you just snip off that part, you can process the basil and it grows right back. So at this point, our family really loves pesto. We've made 22 containers of pesto to freeze through the winter. And I think we're gonna have another go at it here after this batch of basil. So it's a pretty amazing plant with how it can keep coming back. And then on the other side, we've got our onions here that we'll harvest soon. And then this big blank space that you see is where we had another patch of garlic, just like in the front yard. So we've already harvested that garlic, and then we're gonna keep that space open to replant it in the fall, because garlic is best if you can do a fall planting. Once I think they say once the ground hits around 50 degrees is when you wanna put it in, and then it will be ready to get going in the spring. All right, here we have our raspberry patches. All of those are done harvesting for the year, but that's a favorite in our family. And then another vine plant, we have a hardy kiwi. And then I'm just gonna try to sneak you back here quick. We have our mushroom logs back here. So these are shiitake mushroom logs. You wanna have a hard wood, and then you plug them with the mushroom spores and then cover them with wax, and they will produce for years. We finally just replugged them this year after having them for, was it 7 years, Willie?
Yes.
7 years of growing shiitake mushrooms, and they are delicious. We put them under this rain barrel setup we have here. So here are 3 more of our rain barrels, because you want to keep them a little moist but not soaked, but you don't want them right out in the sun. So this is a nice spot for those mushroom logs to be, where they get a little bit of that moisture from the rain barrels but stay out of the sun. And then with these rain barrels, as you can see, they're elevated. We use the elevation so that it comes down a soaker hose and goes down into these gardens. So we have soaker hoses under these plants. So we're gonna do just a couple more minutes, and then we'll shift to Q&A with everyone. We're just gonna take you back this way, and I'll have Willie talk to you about the back part of the yard.
Yeah, so off in the distance, you could probably see our greenhouse. We have a small greenhouse, a little 6x8 greenhouse, which we're able to bring our starters out and start our other plants in, and it's really been a great addition. We used to have raspberries there, but our raspberry patch produced so much that it was hard to keep up with, actually. So introducing this small little greenhouse has been great. In front of the greenhouse, we have zinnias this year. It's something new we planted, and they've been a really treat. We've had these beautiful flowers on our kitchen tables. We've been able to bring them over to the neighbors, which has been great during these times, to be able to have bright flowers around the neighborhood. In front of us, we also have our chicken coop. Our chicken coop we've had now for going on 8 years. The chicken coop is made completely out of our recycled materials. The very bottom of it is a pallet, and based off of that, then the sides are from the pallets that we made our original raised beds with. On top is a rubber roof, and that was recycled, taken off a building in the area, and we upcycled it. On top, you see a little solar panel. That solar panel is connected to a battery to a couple little computer fans out back, which help keep the chickens cool in the summer. And their eggs are in 2 little containers that we get. We can have up to 5 chickens in the city, and we get around 3 to 4 eggs a day, which is a favorite of our family here and our neighbors when we get excess eggs or they watch our chickens for us. Again, this is, and we're also able to take the chicken manure into our triple bin compost system, which we have out back. And after it being in there for a season, the compost then goes into our garden. Katie's now walking into our back garden. Our back garden, we have mound gardens back here, and then on the very back end we have aquaculture, which is actually placing logs in the ground and then putting soil on top of them. So the people that had the sandy soil conditions, aquaculture is another good way to increase the soil fertility with the logs that will actually rot when you place soil on top of it. Right in front of Katie here is a potato tower. In the potato tower, we've tried a handful of different methods between burlap bags, 5 gallons, large trash containers. This year we reused some wooden pallets and made a little potato tower, which I did that as a project with me and my son. We're excited about it. You can see in front of us is the pumpkin plants that are coming out, and beyond that is our prairie out back. The prairie out back, we actually spent a season where we put plastic over just normal grass that we had in our yard and killed off all the grass, all the weeds, and then planted it with a pretty darn quick mix from nursery, which has been a favorite not only of ours but our neighbors. Come and pick the flowers from beyond, and tucked in behind that, which we actually can't see, is our 3-bin compost system. Also in this area is where we're looking to bring in bees into the city, which is something that you can bring into the city, and we're really excited about doing that. And it's just something with the small children and my Katie being allergic to bees that we're trying to figure out exactly how to do it and doing it correct. We've been keeping bees outside the city of La Crosse for the past 5 years. And it's been the most fun and challenging hobby that I've taken on in the garden.
All right, so we're gonna head back up and we'll show you some of the produce we've picked for today. And I'll just quick walk you through the kitchen and then we'll take all those questions. I did see one question come through asking about, do we ever have trouble with city regulations? And the answer is not anymore. When we first moved here, like I said, we put in that prairie, and it was not the time yet in the city to put in a prairie. Back here, you'll see this is our kitchen that we work from, and we do all our canning back here. We did have to tear down that prairie, and that was a real bummer. But since then, I've learned to read all of the ordinances very, very thoroughly. So I would say if you're questioning whether you should do something, go ahead, grab those ordinances off the city website and read through them. So you can have 5 chickens, you can now have bees in the city, you can have rain gardens as long as they adhere to the rain garden guidelines of the UW Extension program. And you can have those native prairies, but you have to make sure you keep the noxious weeds down. There's just a question that said, what is the size of your lot? It seems really deep. Willie, do you have the dimensions on it?
We're looking at 120 feet by 40 feet.
Willie said it's 120 feet by 40 feet. The interesting thing is it is deep. We really try to maximize it. We do have this open space where we're sitting right here because, again, we have kids, we have a dog. So we do feel like it's important to have some space to run around. But as for the size of the lot, it is narrow. I will say where our chicken coop is where our chicken coop can be. There is no movement any way in any direction that we can still adhere to the regulations of the city inside the chicken coop. So it is very specific about how close you can be to freestanding buildings. And you need to make sure that you get signatures from your neighbors to okay with them that you can have chickens. They are very quiet though. They're a great animal to have, and if you have kids, it's a great lesson for them on just caring for animals. Somebody asked how many varieties of food we have on here. We have a lot. I tried to put a sample of just of what we picked today. So we've got apples, carrots, many varieties of tomatoes, garlic. There's the eggs. We've got green and brown eggs, ground cherries, peppers, jalapeno peppers, different varieties of kale, cucumbers, garlic, onions, beets. We have tried to put as much as we can in here. And like I said, all the fruit trees too. Willie's trying to count it up right now as we're talking. But it's a lot. And like I said, it's deliberate about what we have here and how we plant it in order to get the most out of this space. Because some stuff will just take over. Actually, here's a great example of our son throwing down these pumpkins. Here's one right by a sandbox. And I am just amazed that pumpkin plant is quite resilient and is somehow growing next to the sand and has a flower on it. So the last thing here is we've just got our honey from our bees. That's a very small amount that you're seeing there. The bees do produce a lot. So if you get into beekeeping, I know that was an interest area amongst this group, you can generate a lot of honey in a year. So it's a really great thing.
Katie, Ethan had a question. He says, my wife and I have a 2 by 10 foot area in front of our apartment. The previous tenants treated it horribly with trash and chemicals, and there was previously stone laid down. Should I be worried about planting edible plants in that area? What would you recommend so we can plant in that area?
All right, I'm gonna turn it around on Willie for that one.
Yeah, again, that's another perfect spot for looking into a raised bed. What you would do is I would actually look at placing some cardboard down over the area and elevating the garden above that. It could take a while for the chemicals to get out of it. When we lived in Vermont, actually, we grew a garden in an area that we found out later that season is actually where they stored their equipment for building a road in that area previously. We were able to successfully grow a lot of stuff in that area, but it was something we weren't aware of when we rented the place. But because you're unaware of it, Ethan, I would look at doing a raised bed in that area. Yeah, Katie's coming over here right now with one of the family favorite chickens. This is a barred rock chicken that we have. And it's a favorite of our son and daughter here. It lays brown eggs. Just a beautiful bird. The chickens at our house actually become our pets. We've had names of chickens. All our chickens have been named over the years. And they're our family favorite for sure. Our dog is actually, we have a dog and he does really well with the chickens. When we get them as chicks, we introduce Jeb to the chickens at a young age, and he actually becomes very territorial over the chickens. And we actually can't have other dogs in the yard with Jeb because he becomes a little aggressive to the other dogs because he's very protective of the chickens. Any other questions?
Willie, there was another question. Someone asked that they said that all of their beans, peas, and kale go to the rabbits. Do you just grow so much that the loss to wildlife isn't a big deal, or how do you combat that?
No, we struggle with the rabbits also. With the rabbits, our dog is a big help. Jeb chases the rabbits outside of the yard, which is really good. And then we use a natural pest, rabbit repellent around the plants as they're growing. But it is a really important time of the year to really keep an eye on them. Again, the raised beds are extremely helpful with keeping the rabbits out. In the past, we've actually put chicken wire above the wooded section, additional 2 feet above that. That's what we did for our raised bed out front, our square foot garden, which seems to get a lot more rabbits. We've actually had friends that have had problems with squirrels significantly, and you can actually make like a chicken wire cage over the top of them to be able to keep out the pests. And depending where you're at, that can be incredibly important. Even my sister in Texas had to make cages to go over the top to keep from the pests in her neighborhood. Any other questions?
There's one final question here, and that is, what are your plans for your perfect solar roof?
Yeah, well,
interests?
yeah, we have this amazing south-facing roof here right now. And we also have a really great garage roof. We don't have, on our current metal roof, and our garage roof are both ideal. We've had a handful of people this year come out for giving us quotes and looking into solar. So we are looking at moving in that direction. We'll probably look at it for next year. But we're very excited for it.
Well,
One other thing I was going to add just real quick is that, there was a question of what we get for vegetables out of here. One other thing that I would say to consider is, what do you want to eat? So one thing that we've really figured out is we eat a lot of tomato products. So we try to grow a lot of tomatoes. Even if they have a little, blemish on them, we just freeze them or cut that part off. But we now have found that we can make our own pizza sauce, pasta sauce, ketchup, soup. Really every tomato product that we eat, we make here now. And it's amazing the stuff you can freeze. Salsa, we freeze our salsa now. So if you're not into canning or you don't have enough time, there's a lot of stuff you can freeze and it maintains that maintains that quality. One of the other things we grow is eggplant. Then we make baba ganoush out of it and we freeze it and use the parsley and cilantro in our yards. So just a lot of times what we do is we just sit down and think about what we want to eat for the year, and then that's what we focus on. All right, sorry, Casey.
No, that's all right. Katie and Willie, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day.
Yeah, no
to spend
problem.
with us and show us around. It's really what you've done with your property is just really inspirational. Really, really cool. So thank you so much. So many great
Thank you.
ideas.
Yeah, thanks
our
for letting us
participants
join you.
Yeah. Oh, our pleasure, really. So at this time, we actually want to, for our participants, we want to launch just a quick poll. So Carrie is going to launch that. You'll see it come across your screen in just a second here. There we go. So again, this is an anonymous poll. Please just take if you're a participant, please take a couple of seconds just to answer. This helps us make sure that we're on track with our programming at Sustainability Institute. And as you're finishing up that, I want to make you aware of our next sustainability virtual offering. And that will be happening, I believe we have a slide for it. Carrie, if you could share that. There we go. So our next virtual tour is actually with a business called Go Macro, which is a business in Viola, Wisconsin, and they make plant-based nutrition bars. So they've got a really interesting sustainability story. They're right here in our backyard. So please feel free to join us. That's Wednesday, September 30th at 2 p.m. You can look into registering for that at sustaininstitute.com/upcoming events. Again, thank you everyone for attending. If you thought that this was valuable, if you enjoy Sustainability Institute programming, please do consider becoming a member. Head to our website, sustaininstitute.com, to do that. Otherwise, we again extend just heartfelt thanks to the Bittners for sharing their yard and their time and their expertise with us. Really great story about what we can do in our yards, even if it's just a little piece of that. Everyone, thank you so much for attending, and we will see you hopefully on September 30th.